This is a Jmix exclusive.
I'm with author John Potash of The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders. Also, a newer book to be turned into a film, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA's Murderous Targeting of SDS, Panthers, Hendrix, Lennon Cobain, Tupac, and other activists. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate having you here.
Thanks for having me on, Jesse.
Um, for those that are potential readers, buyers of your book, can you provide a brief synopsis for those who are looking to purchase your new book?
Sure. Yeah, I mean as you said with the subtitle, it's about both musicians and activists, and it's about the way that the CIA's particular program, Project MK Ultra, used drugs to undermine activists and especially musicians who were activists. And it shows the evidence that the MK Ultra program basically manipulated a lot of musicians to promote drugs, but then when they started sobering up and they and getting more into activism, better activism when they were sobering up, they did them in, and that's basically the book in a nutshell.
Now,
And of course, being 40 pages, it's a whole lot more than that. It's about the use of drugs to subvert communities, and particularly communities of color.
you come from a very prestigious collegiate background with fellow alumni, including former President Barack Obama. A two-part question: what led you into this line of journalism, and do you ever fear repercussions for the things that you write?
Um, did Barack Obama, did he go to Columbia, or is that right? I don't even know. He went on there undergrad or something.
I
I
believe
don't,
so.
I
Yeah.
don't even. I don't think he went undergrad, but and I'm not sure. Maybe he went to got a master's there at some point or something. But I think he went to. But who knows? But what led me to this? Um, I guess my family was into activism. I had a grandfather who was an Marxist lawyer, and he did free work his whole life for the NAACP. He was a defense attorney, and my mother was a lawyer who was into leftist activism. My father organized doctors against the war, Vietnam War, and so I kind of I was talked about this stuff about activist issues all my life, and so when I saw that. So when I read about these musicians who were also into the same kind of political ideas as I was into and had the same ideals as I had, I got very interested in them. And I think when I looked up, the research on musicians and their activism, there was very little out there, and very little out there about why they died so young. And so I thought it's time to publicize what was really going on when I, dug into it and found that the activist side of these musicians was little talked about, and then why they died young was little talked about. And so, as I thought it was about time to uncover that, to both spread the word on these great activist ideas that Tupac had, and Kurt Cobain had, and John Lennon had, and as well as Jimi Hendrix, who had turned very activist in at least the last year of his life.
Do you ever fear repercussions for the things that you write?
And I do fear repercussions. I'm particularly fearful right now because I did complete the film based on my second book, and I don't know if you've seen the trailer on my Facebook page on that. But so having gotten that trailer out there, trying to get that film into Film Fest now, I am worried about that. As you might have, as I'm sure you know, Jesse, you probably saw that A&E documentary where they said that 28 people close to Tupac or that were researching Tupac's case or were investigating Tupac died young, and that's very worrisome. So including Russell Poole, the investigating police officer who supposedly had a heart attack right as he was giving new evidence to his former police colleagues.
You bring up the mysterious death of Russell Poole. Like you said, he was about to expose police involvement in not only the killing of Tupac Shakur, but the attempted murder of Suge Knight. He had felt that he had exonerated Suge Knight and was trying to present evidence, to my understanding, that exonerated him. Do you feel that Russell Poole was targeted simply due to his outing of the LAPD cops involved in his career and life, and even at the end of his life?
Um, to be honest, I don't know if I agree with that assessment of what he was coming out with at the very end of his life in terms of him exonerating Suge Knight. But granted, I didn't, Mike Carlin, I think his name is, says he was the co-author with Russell Poole of a final book, and Mike seems like a nice enough guy. I just don't totally trust him. I think he brought the issue a little closer to the truth, and that's fine in my book to get things closer to the truth. I don't pretend to know what the exact truth is, but I just my evidence suggests that Knight was very low in the totem pole in terms of involvement, but he was somewhat involved. How he didn't? I'm sure he didn't know the full picture of what was going on, but I think he was somewhat involved in Tupac's murder or assassination, we could call it. Now I can't remember the full what your full question was, but I think that I think Russell was probably targeted, yes, for outing the police involvement in Tupac's murder. And he did have solid evidence. He did come out with some very solid evidence. And being, an official source, that's very important. That an official source can blame his fellow, police officers and show the solid evidence for it, and show that Death Row, Records was involved in drug trafficking, and they were involved in gun running, and and so when he shows all this evidence of that, and there's police reports on that, and yet no charges are brought against Death Row Records or Suge Knight or Reggie Wright Jr., then you gotta say why not, and the why not is because there's higher level protection, and that's the way it usually works. And that higher level protection could have been FBI, but it's more likely even higher than that, because the agency that's most involved in drug trafficking, really in this world, you could say, but at least in this country, is the CIA. And that comes from DEA agents like Mike Levine, who wrote some great exposés, on the CIA drug trafficking, and how when he would infiltrate, top drug cartels and get to the point where he was ready to bring a case to court on certain, top drug cartel members in various countries around the world, he said the CIA would come in and squash his case and say, no, we're not going, you're not allowed to go any further with this. And he said it happened time and again. And I have him saying this, of course, in my film, but you can read his books. You can hear him on New York radio talking about this. He has a radio program on Pacifica Radio in New York City, so where I used to live, where I used to hear him. And so this is the way this works, and this is why Russell Poole's evidence was so important.
Perhaps I misspoke when I was trying to explain. It was to my understanding that Russell Poole was bringing evidence against the One Oak shooting, that the police had actually let the shooter into the back door on that final.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know that much about the One Oak shooting, but I hear you. So yeah, that it's certainly possible that Suge Knight had nothing to do with that shooting, and the police laying him in the back door is very interesting. I don't know that much about the One Oak shooting though, but Who else did that involve?
Well, the One Oak shooting was Suge Knight was shot 6 times, and
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Russell Poole
going on.
believed that an off-duty L.A. County Sheriff's officer is the one who actually let the shooter in through the back door of the club to target Suge Knight.
Oh wow, yeah, I didn't. I heard vaguely about that. I'm sorry I didn't get into the details of that because I was already well into my next book, and then working on. I think at that time I actually was already into working on the film, and so I had to stop research and keep focusing on that because I work full time as a counselor for a living to pay my bills, and the writing and the film work is really just hobbies on the side. But that's it's very interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see the authorities trying to do in people too close to the situation, like Suge Knight, to hide their tracks for what they pulled off in terms of the murder of Tupac.
Now, you had brought up Death Row Records and being a front for cocaine distribution in the 90s. In Russell Poole's own files, he had an informant named Mike Soto who was stated that off-duty cops, including Kevin Gaines, were providing cover for cocaine transactions, reminiscent of the Iron Contra scandal.
Sure.
Like we were just talking about, do you believe that the CIA or government entities actually use local and lower level police in their targeting of black leaders?
Yes, I do. Now, first, regarding the trafficking, it's interesting evidence that you brought up that I don't even remember the exact names of people like that you brought up, and they're important. It's good to have those exact names. What I have in my book was more about that I remember. I might even have mentioned some of that name Soto that you mentioned, but I focus a little more on Michael Harry Harris because of like you said with the Iran Contra stuff. He was one of the top two understudies for Freeway Ricky Ross, and Freeway Ricky Ross got bulk cocaine from some CIA operatives who were working for with the Contras, and they were the liaisons to the Contras. Some were Contras who he got his cocaine directly from, and so that of course, for people that don't know, Freeway Ricky Ross was the top kind of black drug kingpin in the country. And Michael Harry O'Harris then was found by a judge to have officially started Death Row Records. And he did that with his lawyer, Dave Kenner, who stayed on when Harris went to jail. And then, Kenner was actually put himself as the owner of the umbrella group over Death Row Records. And so Kenner was really the power behind Death Row Records. He brought on, Suge Knight to be like the chair and like kind of official head of Death Row Records, but it was really Kenner that owned it all. And Kenner had all kinds of connections to, he was a lawyer for top people in Las Vegas, top politicians in Las Vegas. He had connections to mafia, etc. So he was the real force behind Death Row Records, and obviously he got untouched. And so now to get into the undercover people, do I think they use undercover police officers to kill black leaders? Yes, that's kind of known. But I show the evidence of it with Malcolm X, for example. Gene Roberts was an undercover police officer who was inserted as to be part of Malcolm X's group. He rose in the ranks of Malcolm X's security, and then he was the first person to arrive at Malcolm X's body when he was shot. And so I show the evidence that his purpose in that was not to save him, but was to check on the life signs to make sure the shooting and the assassination was accomplished. And the evidence shows that that's what happened because Malcolm X's wife was a nurse. So Betty Shabazz tried to run over to Malcolm X's body, and a woman who came with Gene Roberts grabbed her and wouldn't let her get to the body, so Gene Roberts could go by himself and make sure the assassination was successful. And then it came out, and then Gene Roberts went on become part of the Black Panthers undercover. And when Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, was in the Black Panthers, and he helped set up a shooting of the New York Black Panthers that almost killed Lumumba Shakur, Afeni Shakur's first husband. But then he set them up to be imprisoned, and he testified at their trial that he was a undercover police intelligence agent for the Bureau of Special Services. And so that was his position, was to set up those Black Panther leaders.
This is a Jmix exclusive.
Whatever, shut up. Yeah.